how much of this could you handle? Could you watch more than a minute before you closed the window and went to a different YouTube video? Sorry, I got stuck in a terrible video game for a moment there.
Clearly the gangsters did not work for these gangsters.
You know what?
Otherwise, we would not need me to go beat them up and steal the suitcase and transport it.
Selling drugs is bad, but sometimes that's the high price of justice.
I'm pretty sure Captain America said that.
Do something! God!
The Quiet Man was announced during Square Enix's own press conference at E3 2018, and it drew some attention both for its highlighting of a deaf main character as well as its curious choice to blend live-action footage into its in-game cutscenes. It also got a little bit of attention because the developer, Human Head Studios, had developed the cult favorite first-person shooter Prey back in 2006. Square Enix dropped The Quiet Man onto storefronts last week, and while there were no reviews available for launch day, word from the press was calling it the room of video games. So, naturally, fellow SDGC member John and I had to complete the game as part of a charity livestream event this last weekend. I have some thoughts. For my one positive note, the game is mercifully short. It takes about 3 hours to complete, with most of that being in-game cutscene, whether live action or rendered in the in-game engine. The brief moments where the player is given control are limited entirely to small single-room brawls with at most a handful of enemies. The game is essentially a movie with playable fights, although I should probably make sure to mention that I don't think that's inherently a bad thing.
Oh,
yeah, just swing it there.
Weird.
He does. I just want him to...
I love his shuffle.
Look at this. Look, wait, hold on, what is he doing? I'm not even standing in front of you. Oh, there you are. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I lost track of you. This mask, Oh my god, I'm just going to walk around and dodge him. I'm just...
No peripheral vision.
This is fucking fantastic. Oh my god. Oh my god! Dude, Whoop.
The unfortunate problem with The Quiet Man is that there's honestly very little that it does right. The combat is both mechanically very simple and incredibly sloppy to try to play out. The in-game animations are stiff and wooden in that same kind of way that early Xbox 360 era titles were, and in general, the game is just buggier than a southern basement. The live action segments aren't really any better either. Many of the shots are very poorly staged and blocked off, and for example, there are several lingering takes close up on characters who have just been shot, showing the blood spreading from a wound on their chest, but no clothing damage where they were just shot. There are some other problematic elements of the game's story that I can get into a little later, but we'll leave that as an aside for now. But what is probably the game's most glaring and obvious problem is the main hook itself. You see, aside from a small live-action segment at the very beginning of the game, there is effectively no audio in order to simulate the main character's deafness. That means that pretty much all environmental sounds are muffled down to nothing, all dialogue is rendered inaudible, and most importantly of all, there are no subtitles or closed captions. It's not impossible to tell a story without any kind of audio or music, it's just really hard and takes a lot of special care. You end up having to rely much more heavily on visual elements like environmental design, editing, cinematography, and the body language of your actors. You couldn't for example, have a 15-minute dialogue-heavy scene where two characters sit in a dimly lit interior and talk about the plot. Oh. If you somehow haven't guessed by now, that's almost exactly the approach that The Quiet Man takes. They shot and animated what appears to be a very dialogue-heavy crime thriller inspired, at least loosely, by classic film noir elements, and then just chopped the audio track right out and called it a day. This means that for most of the game's runtime, outside of those rare moments where you're stumbling around a dilapidated building beating up the same Hispanic triplet gangsters, very tall John Leguizamo, or a Death Eater with an electronic wand, you're sitting and watching dialogue-heavy cutscenes with no dialogue. What's frustrating about this is it doesn't even make sense from a diegetic standpoint. There are several scenes in the game where the main character communicates with someone else using sign language, and the character clearly has the ability to read lips. So the character is taking part in conversations, but you, the player, are not allowed in. Your simulated deafness is more extreme than that of the main characters, to the detriment of communicating what is actually happening in the story.
So, son, I'm really sorry about that one time the other night when I beat the fucking shit out of you and threw you across the room and then threw a bottle at you. But look, in my defense, I just thought
like you're going to tell anybody.
I just thought you were ignoring me. I didn't realize you were deaf.
I need you to parse that out. Characters who understand they are speaking to a deaf person who would need to either sign with them or read their lips to communicate have extended conversations with the main character that we are forced to watch, where neither the main character nor the audience are capable of playing their part in that half of the conversation, which I presume is important because it took up 5 minutes of the game's runtime. The game ends with a countdown leading to the release of a free patch that will allow you to replay the game after beating it once, with the original audio and dialogue tracks added back in. This confirms what honestly should have already been obvious, that the game was designed with its audio in mind and that dialogue track was stripped out, rather than being designed from the ground up to tell a story properly in a wordless format. But while adding the audio back in corrects that baffling choice, it still doesn't fix the rest of the game. The game still has the worst combat any major publisher has put out in at least the last decade. The live action segments still look like a cheap pilot for a CW original series. The game still troublingly presents Hispanic people as near identical gangsters who squat in dilapidated graffiti-sprayed buildings, and also very tall John Leguizamo. The only black character is some kind of drug kingpin who is shown as a child pulling a gun on another child because they stole their fake Jordans. And the only woman in the game, who appears to be the main character's mother, exists both as a woman in a refrigerator in the past and also a damsel in distress in the present, while also having an uncomfortably romantic tension with the main character.
No, okay.
Oh no, we're having a Spider-Man. Oh yeah!
Oh god! Oh god! Oh god!
It is confirmed that that's not a girlfriend who looks like his mom.
God.
That's his mom.
Oh god!
That's
oh
his
god!
mom.
Oh god!
That is just straight his mom.
In a lot of ways, the people who compare this to The Room are not wrong. The game is not cheaply made, but is loaded down with terrible decisions while also seemingly convinced of its own brilliance. Even the elements that on paper are sound end up being executed in a very amateurish fashion. It is bad in ways and on a level that do not make sense coming from a studio like Human Head and a publisher like Square Enix. John bought The Quiet Man for $13 brand new on release week. I can't be sure that it was worth that. I wrote in a post on another website that The Quiet Man is one of the worst games. Usually a statement like that comes with some kind of qualifier at the end. it's one of the worst games of the year, or one of the worst games that Square Enix has put out in a long time. But honestly, no matter what qualifier you add to the end of that sentence, it is ultimately true. Because The Quiet Man is one of the worst games. I know. The only solace I can take from 3 hours that John and I had to spend with it is at least we raised a little money for sick kids in the process.
No, I can hurt him. No, I can hurt him.
You needed that theme song power up, John.
No, I just needed something to wake me up inside. I've risen. I have awoken. Now the gamers are rising. Here we go. I've woken up inside now, baby. Let's do it.
All right, and going off script. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the first of an occasional series of editorial style videos I'm going to be doing for SDGC. As a reminder, if you're not currently following Super Deformed Gamescast, you should on like every platform that we publish on. Obviously here on YouTube, you can give us a like, you can give us a follow or subscribe or whatever word it is that we use on this particular hell site. Links to the other hell sites are below in the video description. You can catch Super Deformed Gamescast live Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's where we usually talk about the biggest news events by our estimation of the past week in gaming. Although sometimes we do community gaming stuff instead. And in that case, you should be joining along anyway. I'm not sure what my dog is eating back there, but I feel like I should be concerned. Ha! It was pine needles. I don't know how those got in the house, but I'm blaming you. Anyway, follow the lot of us on our various social media platforms. You can find me on Twitter at Derek of the Dykes if you want more of my completely terrible takes. Peace out, have a good rest of your day, and don't harass people about video games. Looking at you, Diablo fans.